नहीं रुक जाओ, मैं इंट्रोड्यूस करूंगा उसके बाद। I guess it's my camera is visible.
Yep.
Yeah. Hey everyone, welcome to the first edition of TestMu. We are delighted to host everyone here today, and I'm sure this is going to be a special edition for us, and we hope it's going to be a special edition as well for you as well. And before we start, I just wanted to remind that this session is streaming live on the YouTube, and you'll get all the recorded sessions, like this session and all other sessions of TestMu Conference on our YouTube channel. So yeah, let's start. So I'm Suhag, and I'll be your host for this session today. And before we start the session, I would like to thank all our partners for supporting us and being a part of this event. We encourage all of you to go and check out their booths from the lounge if you wish to connect with them later. Now, I'm delighted to introduce you with Anmol Gupta, who is a dear friend. Just to give you a brief introduction about Anmol, he comes with more than 5 years of experience in tech and product management. And Anmol loves to work with innovative ideas and focus on solving complex problems. That too at scale. Yeah. So he's passionate about data analytics and engineering, but you can believe me, he's I would any day say that he's designer at heart. So today, Anmol is going to talk about test intelligence. So teams are generally struggling with the problem of flaky test, right? It's challenging to differentiate between the actual test failures and failures caused by unrealistic tests. So hence the test needs to be intelligent, right? And this workshop, Anmol will address this particular problem. So without wasting any time, let's get started. Over to you, Anmol.
First of all, thank you so much, Suhag, for such a warm welcome. And hi, everyone. And thank you for all of you also to join here today for this workshop. Let me just share my screen real quick and let's get started. Cool. Today, before I begin, I would want to warmly welcome all of you here on this workshop on test intelligence. Before we begin, I am Anmol Gupta, a senior product manager at LambdaTest, and I'll be taking you through this journey on test intelligence. What are we going to discuss today? We are going to discuss majorly four things: continuous testing, what problems come at scale with continuous testing, what are flaky test cases, and what do we have in terms of test analytics and what do we actually need. But first things first, every one of us wants to ship code fast, right? That is the one thing that we all want to do. The goal is to do the DevOps, to go from planning stage to actually deploying our codes, features, bug fixes, everything at the fastest speed possible, while we make sure that there are zero production defects. How do we do so? We need to make sure that whatever we are making, whatever we are merging, whatever we are releasing and then deploying is tested at all stages, all possible stages. And that is what essentially continuous testing means. But what is required for continuous testing? We need a lot of test cases, and I'm sure all of you are already aware of that. This is a ideal testing pyramid. Ideally, as software engineering teams, we are supposed to have a good amount of unit test cases, then integration test cases, then API test cases, followed by UI tests, and then some manually exploratory testing. But that is not the case always. What usually happens with teams is, as they are starting up, they have a lot of manual testing, a lot of UI testing that is followed then by integration tests and a very less amount of unit test cases, hence referred to as an inverted testing pyramid. But when products start to scale, Teams get slowed down by multiple reasons, by multiple factors. Too many test cases. As number of features increase in your product, the number of test cases also starts to increase. Long running test cases. When you have too many test cases, that simply means that you would have to spend too much time waiting for those test cases to actually run and finish. Flaky test cases. Was a failure actually a failure, or was it just an unreliable test case? And lastly, but not the least, there is no visibility on the test cases. The only information that you get out of your standard CI/CD platforms is that, hey, these test cases passed, these test cases failed. But what about history of test cases? What about how is a test case behaving since last multiple executions? That is all right, but what does this actually mean in day-to-day operations? Well, we talked about too many test cases. It simply correlates to having high test execution times in your release cycles. When you have long running test cases, it simply means that you're having a huge amount of velocity leakage from your dev teams. And your CI pipelines are just clogged because you have so long of a test case that your CI pipeline just can't keep running. Flaky test cases cause issues with quality control for your dev teams and sometimes lack of confidence on the test cases itself. And lastly, because you don't have any visibility on the test cases, it is very hard for you and your team to measure the ROI on your test cases. I firmly believe that what you cannot monitor, what you cannot measure, you cannot improve. Let's talk about the first problem, too many test cases. As we all discussed, that when a project grows, the number of test cases along with it also grows significantly. But the only solution that we all refer to when that happens is let's run those test cases in parallel. But let's find out what actually happens if we just run those test cases in parallel. So in this particular case, you see there are 45 test cases which are taking different execution times in their runs. Let's parallelize these test cases in sequential order and see what happens. Let's say we have 5 parallel nodes. This is essentially how your system would parallelize the test cases. The question is this correct? Definitely not. Why? Because we just sequentially aligned these test cases. We found that there is a huge difference between the parallel nodes. One node is finishing up in mere 9 minutes, whereas the second node is taking up to 23 minutes. And this can become a disaster if you have large number of test cases. So what is required? Smarter parallelization. The same test cases can be orchestrated and parallelized in a smarter way so that overall execution time of our test cases, overall execution time of our nodes is essentially similar and we get the results faster as compared to our previous case, which was taking 23 minutes for the whole job to finish. With the smarter orchestration mechanisms, we receive results now in 16 minutes. Next comes that, hey, we have a lot of test cases, but are our test cases reliable or not? How do we know that? And that brings us to the question of flaky tests. But before I go any further to talk about, let's first understand what a flaky test case is. As you can see on the screen, we have a single commit and we just executed the test cases 2 times. On the first run, the test cases, some test cases fail, some test cases pass. But on the second execution, you see, there are different set of test cases which have failed. Essentially, these 5 test cases showed different returns, showed different results, both passing and failure results, even though there was nothing changed in that commit. This is what we refer to as flaky test cases. But how do we figure out which of my test cases are flaky, which of my test cases are unreliable? More of on more of that, that is not just the problem. Because you have these kind of flaky test cases in your system, it causes confusion to your teams, it causes chaos for your developer teams to figure out whether a failure, or whether if something broke with because it was actually a code change, because it was actually something which was changed and then broke the build, or was it just a flaky test case? Your dev teams would have spent a huge amount of hours figuring out the cause of a broken build, only to realize at times that the build did not fail because of a specific change in the code, but because of a flaky test case in the system which was introduced maybe a month ago. But the real question over here is, how do we combat this flakiness? Now, there are multiple ways to do that, starting off with the very basic process of manually rerunning the failed test cases. But that is not what we need to do or we want to do in this modern world, right? Second process that we can do is have maybe automatic checks in our CI/CD pipelines to make sure that the CI in itself reruns the failed test cases. The problem with that is that your CI would just keep rerunning those failed test cases up to a certain number of limit, but that doesn't guarantee that you figure out whether that test case is flaky or actually a failing test case. Moving forward, what we can do is maybe correlate the testing logic to our test results and commit information, and then maybe figure out that hey, this test case is something which is flaky. The problem with this particular approach is we will not be able to figure out these flaky test cases on the go. We need multiple executions, we need previous history, we need data on those test cases and the changes that we have made in that duration to actually figure out and correlate that information, and then come to a conclusion that hey, whether this test case is flaky or not. What we actually need is proactive testing to make sure that we find and flag flaky test cases at the door. On those regards, companies like Spotify, SoundCloud have been working to figure out flaky test cases in a proactive manner. So, for instance, what you see on your screen right away is a process that Spotify implements in their teams. What they do is they take a test case and they run that particular test case n number of times to make sure that whether that particular test case is stable. And only when a test case is stable, they make that test case as a part of your actual testing suite. Similar to Spotify, SoundCloud does a similar process, and they run the test cases as well multiple times to come up with certain numbers and come up with certain metrics around their test cases to make sure that their test suite in itself is stable in nature. But that is not it. There are more ways to figure out and do proactive flakiness management. We just talked about running newly added test cases n number of times, which Spotify and SoundCloud are doing already. But we can deploy other processes. We can take into consideration other practices to figure out these flaky test cases at the door. For instance, what if I take my test cases, jumble the order of my test cases, and then run them multiple times? What if I degrade the quality of my testing environment to check at what latency maybe, or at what particular compute, or what particular limitations on my memory and help me figure out flaky test cases? And lastly, how can I automate the mutation testing on my code to see whether my test cases are actually testing my test code? What is the quality of my test case? That is something which makes sure that the testing and the test suits that you have is actually reliable. Coming to the last problem, the CI/CD tools that we use these days provide us basic information. That is mere visualizations of the data or the test information. All we get out of the CI/CD standard tools is information that these many test cases passed, these many test cases failed. Some basic information on how much time my test cases are taking. But what is missing over there is actionable insights. We don't get information on what was my mean time to failure for a particular test case. What was my mean time before repair for a particular scenario? How do I debug faster? Development teams spend a lot of time going from one place to another, going from one portal to another, going from one data source to another to figure out and debug the issues faster. What is actually required? We need a smart reporting and analytics which provide us actionable insights, which help us to do root cause analysis faster, which provide us heat maps on our test cases. Above that, we need intelligent automation, just like we talked about the case when we have a lot of test cases. We need tools which help us debug and validate things faster, which help us orchestrate and schedule in an automated way so that developers do not need to worry about it. Automation takes care of orchestration and scheduling as well. We need intelligent systems that work cross CI tools and support different frameworks so that we don't have to go to different tools and different frameworks and different portals to just get the same amount of information or to get to our root cause analysis for the issues that we're facing. We need a one stop solution which is elastic, which is robust, secure, and reliable, which helps us scale when we need and which helps us test as fast as possible and runs all kind of test cases at one place. On proactive flaky test management, we need tools that help us do the flaky test management in a jiffy. We don't want to make our own algorithms. We don't want to uh, spend our developer efforts on making internal tooling which takes care of these things. We need job trends. We need trends on our test cases. We need an overall view on the test cases that are there in my system. How is my test case behaving since last multiple days? Is my test case passing? Is my test case failing? Is my test case passing and failing at random? Is my test case flaky? What has been the details of my test case? What is the health of my test case? How is my test case changed as compared to the previous run? What is my mean time before a failure? We need all of this information at one place. Talking about flakiness, I need information on how how much of my test cases are actually reliable, and how much of my test cases are something which I maybe need to correct, which I maybe need to remove from my test suite. Are my test cases even creating value for my team, or they just taking time in my CI pipeline? I need information whether my test cases are flaky or stable. I need to also understand that what is the nature of that flakiness if I'm talking about flakiness. Is it a test case which flakes once in a while? Or is it a test case which is way too much flaky? Coming to the team, I want my team to have test cases. I want my team to proactively write test cases. But I also need to monitor that. And I need all of this at one place. What is my team doing? Is my team even adding test cases? What is the health of the test cases that were added by my team members? What are the endpoints maybe which my test cases are testing? Is the issue with my test case, or is the issue with the endpoint? How frequent is that issue? All of that information is something that we need at one place to make the testing experience great. Modern web applications need modern testing solutions. We have evolved. We need tools that are intelligent in test orchestration techniques that help us manage flaky test cases proactively, and those give us actionable insights so that we can actually debug things faster, because that is what helps the development teams move and reach the development velocity that they need. What is required is a intelligent test platform. That is about it from my side today, and I'll be very happy to take any questions that you guys might have.
Anmol.
Hey, Sohag.
Yeah. So thank you. First of all, thank you so much for that insightful session. Like taking us through the very basics of it, like what is flaky test, how to combat that, what is required, and like how modern testing solutions and modern testing tools are required for
Yeah.
this level of testing. So thanks a lot for this walkthrough, and I'm sure it was very insightful for me, and I guess. From the looking at the questions, I guess it is insightful for our audience as well. I We have received a few questions,
Sure.
so directly let's go to there. Okay, yeah. So Gautam is asking, is it true that a flaky test case can be managed with a stable environment? If so, how efficient is this?
All right. So, Gautam, when we talk about flaky test cases, there are n number of reasons why a test case might be flaky, right? When you say that, can we manage a flaky test case with a stable environment? It might help you manage it a bit, but not in a longer run, obviously. Why? Because think of it this way: you have a environment, you have maybe a pre-prod or a prod environment which you use internally, but then a test case might be flaky because of a reason which is not in control of that environment. It might be hitting up an external API, and when that happens, there is a network delay over there, right? And that might cause your test case to flake. Your test case might pass when it received the response within that time frame, but it might also fail when there was some delay in your network. Now, because you just had a stable environment, that doesn't guarantee that, because it is possible that in that environment, because the network delays were never there, everything worked fine. But when that feature actually went off to a customer, and when the customer was using maybe from their web app or from their mobile, they faced a network delay, and then that network delay caused something to break or caused some bad experience to your customer. The point is that particular issue should have been caught by your test case, but because your test case was just checked on a very stable environment, it would never occur to you, right? And that is why we are talking about systems that help you do that, that help you maybe mock an unstable environment in between while you are testing, to actually make sure that whether your test case is actually checking the feature in its totality, is it actually covering that depth of testing that it should. I believe that answers your question.
I guess yes, that absolutely makes a lot of sense to me as well. Let's get to the next question. Uh,
Okay.
it's a very simple one and everyone's problem. Anmol Gupta,
Okay.
how do we avoid flaky test cases? Is there any magical way of doing that?
Okay, so firstly, thank you, Muthu Kumar. That is the question I get a lot, because no matter what kind or what size your team is, you have at least 7 to 8% of test cases that are flaky in nature. It's just that we don't know those test cases are flaky till the time we actually break a build, and then we go back and then we see that, hey, this build didn't break because of my changes, but because of this test case. And that is when I actually realized that, hey, this is a flaky test case, right? So there are multiple ways actually to avoid flaky test cases. You can adopt multiple developer best practices. So for instance, async waits, if you're using async waits in your testing or in your code, you need to have them in a certain manner. It is possible that you have a test case, but then the logic it is testing might give some different results at time. So your test case was not actually written in a way to cover up all the cases which were supposed to come out of that functionality. These are the two major cases which you can, look into to avoid flaky test cases. But that is something I would say is a tricky situation, and that is why it is a, you know problem that everybody faces. And that is why tools are needed which take away the pain for you, which make sure that when a PR is raised, when a new code is committed, and if that code has some test cases, the test cases are checked thoroughly at the door to make sure that they are actually stable. Because if they're not stable, if they are flaky, they would cause confusion to your team members, maybe not today, but maybe 3 months down the line. So I would say you can look into those two specific items.
Sure. I guess we can take one more question, Anmol.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Aaron is asking, is there an intelligent extension for Azure DevOps?
uh, Intelligent extension for Azure DevOps in sense of test cases. Uh, yes, we are working on it at LambdaTest, and it would be out soon.
Yeah, sure. So thanks a lot for that, Anmol. I guess we have been a very interactive and really insightful session today.
Yep.
Yeah, I just before we part away, I just wanted to remind everyone that we would be hosting all our recorded session on YouTube. So everything you are seeing on TestMu, it'll be on YouTube. So you can go back and listen to them again, share with your friends, subscribe to the channels. And yeah, so thanks a lot, Anmol, and have a nice day and evening, night, wherever you are coming from in the world. So yeah, everyone,
Thank you. Thank you
thanks a
so
lot,
much,
Anmol. Yeah,
Kumar, for
bye
hosting me.
bye. Yeah.
Bye.